Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to dive into a concept that really flips app development on its head. What if you could let your data do all the heavy lifting and actually build its own application? I know it sounds a little wild, but that's the whole idea behind model-driven apps, and we're going to break it all down.
Okay, so picture this. You've got all this crucial business data, right? You're managing customer accounts, tracking inventory, maybe handling big projects. You know you need a custom app to keep it all straight, but the idea of writing a bunch of code or hiring a developer, well, it's just a non-starter for most of us. It's a classic problem, but it turns out there is another way.
And that other way? It requires a total shift in how you think about building things. See, instead of starting with a fancy design and trying to jam your data into it, what if you started with the data itself? This whole data-first idea, that's the soul of model-driven apps.
So what in the world is a model-driven app, really? Well, put simply, it's an approach where you don't build the app screen by screen. Nope. Instead, you put all your energy into building a really solid data model. Defining what data you need and how it all connects. And from that one single foundation, the app's layout, its forms, its charts, they are all automatically generated for you. The key thing to remember is this: the data model is the absolute star of the show.
Here's a perfect way to think about it. Imagine you're building a house. You wouldn't start by picking out the curtains, would you? Of course not. You'd start with a solid blueprint and a strong foundation. Well, in our world, your data is that foundation. Once you get that laid out just right, the app, the walls, the rooms, the navigation, it basically builds itself right on top of it.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, especially when you compare it to what you might be more familiar with, Canvas apps. With a Canvas app, you're starting with a totally blank screen, a canvas, and you have complete pixel-perfect control over the design. And that's awesome for crafting a very specific, unique user experience. But with model-driven apps, you're starting with your data model. The layout is actually determined by the data components you add, things like forms and views and charts. This makes it absolutely perfect for those really data-heavy processes, where your number one goal is just to see and interact with your business data as fast as possible so you can make decisions.
Okay, so we get the what, but how does this actually work in the real world? Well, going from just a data model to a fully functional app follows a really clear 5-phase process.
And here it is, the entire roadmap. We start by modeling the data, then we define the processes, compose the app itself, lock down the security, and finally, share it with our team. So let's dig into that very first, and you could say, most important step.
Right, let's talk phase 1, modeling your business data. This is usually done in a secure data platform like Microsoft's Dataverse. And I want to be crystal clear here, because the source material itself says it loud and proud. This is the most important step. Everything else, and I mean everything, flows from this. Getting your data structure right, figuring out what tables you need, what columns go in them, and how they all relate to each other is absolutely, positively critical. Next up, phase 2. This is all about defining your business processes. You can think of this like building guardrails for your users. By creating these consistent processes, you make sure that everyone follows the same steps. It guides them through their work and frees them up from having to remember a whole bunch of manual tasks. It's all about making things consistent and letting people focus. Now we're at phase 3, and this is where you actually compose the app in the app designer. But you're not dragging and dropping every single little button. No, instead, you're just selecting the big components you need, the forms, the views, the charts that you already built based on your data model. And this is where you really see the power of this data-first approach. As you add these pieces, a sitemap is automatically created for you. It handles all the app navigation just like that. No coding required. Pretty cool, right? All right, the core app is composed. We've got something that works, but we are not done with our 5-phase process just yet. These final 2 steps are all about making sure the right people can access it and do so securely. So let's look at how we take this thing live. Phase 4 is all about security. And honestly, this is another incredibly powerful feature. By using what are called security roles, you get this amazingly detailed control over who can do what. For every single data table in your app, you can define who has permission to create, to read, to write, or to delete records. This means you can be sure that your users only see and interact with the data that's actually relevant to their job.
And now for the final phase, sharing the app. And the good news is, it's a super simple 2-step process.
And here are those 2 simple steps. First, and listen up because this is so important, you must assign the right security role to the user. This is what gives them permission to access the data that lives in the tables. If you skip this step, the app just won't work for them.
Only after they have that data access can you move on to step 2, which is just sharing the link to the app. Remember, data access first, then app access. So, we've walked through the whole thing. We started with nothing but data, and now we have a secure, shareable app. But what's the big picture payoff here? Why does any of this matter? Well, let's talk about the low-code advantage.
So here are the real takeaways. With model-driven apps, you can create these powerful, data-centric applications incredibly quickly. And you can do it with little to no coding knowledge, which is a massive game changer. But the best part, I think, is that your focus gets to stay right where it should be, on your business data and your business processes. The system takes care of all the tricky UI design for you, creating a clean, consistent interface that's automatically responsive. It just works across all your devices.
So we'll leave you with this one thought to chew on. Think about all the complex processes and all the data you manage every single day. What business problem could you finally solve? What process could you finally streamline if you just let your data lead the way? Something to think about, right? Thanks for tuning in.